Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another in a series of videos in Crusader Kings 2, where I will be teaching you how to play this game, and I'm teaching you about various aspects of it and the likes. I'm sure you're well aware of what's going on by now, because we're several episodes in. So, today's topic is rather simple, rather short. Raiding. We're going to look at the intricacies of raiding, whether it's worth doing, and yes it is, spoilers. And we're also going to look at how to actually raid. So, first of all, raiding is not really a mechanic for straight up vanilla CK2. There are certain cultures that can raid. First of all, you need to figure out whether your culture can do that or not. Like I said, this is not an exclusively a Norse thing or exclusively horde thing or whatever. This is, it depends from culture to culture, and there are various DLCs which will let you play sorry, which will let you play as a character or as a culture group that can raid. So, first of all, you need to figure out whether you can actually do that and to what extent. To do that, there is a little button that you need to click, and it's very tiny and it's very well hidden. Can you spot it? It's right here. In features. It's the little I letter up there. So you click that and this big thing comes up. So, the Norse Germanic Tribal. You are playing a Norse Germanic king. So, he's actually a petty king game. This is not technically true because the petty king is basically a duke, but shush. Okay. So, it will tell you actually a lot of useful things about your culture, about your religion, about the gameplay mechanics that affect it, and I recommend that you read through all this before you continue and play your character, because this will actually guide you quite a lot and quite well through your first few decades in the game to, sort of, memorize all of this. So you can always come back to it as well and look it up. It's very useful. Very useful. Now, here, as you can see, it says can raid overseas with ships. Not everyone can do this, so we can do that as a Norse Germanic character. Rulers can raid infidel neighbors for loot. Also important. So, what about non-infidel neighbors? Well, we'll talk about everything. The short answer is you'll see. First of all, let's raise our men, raise our banners. Yes. And we'll do so in Ladoga and what will later become... What is that city? St. Petersburg's there. This will become some sort of Russian city I'm not aware of, but whatever. And am I saying that just because I can't pronounce this? Yes. Alright, so let's ignore pretty much everything that we do in this game, which is, get our heir married and all that good stuff. Let's not do that, actually. So we need a Russian. Christian, Slavic, let's stick with pagans for now. Make pagan Russia. Make Russia Germanic pagan again. He is actually Slavic. Yeah, that's the trade-off, I remember now. Ambition, become king of the Rus. War. Set down focus. We're going to do this really quickly. And get a couple of people happy, like so. And auto-assign commanders. Alright, so we have most of what is our kingdom basically set up. Now, let's take a look at the actual raids. So, in order to begin conducting raids, you click this button here. So what does it do? Well, looter armies cost 10% maintenance if you are at peace. If you have an active army and you click this, suddenly you're paying only 10% of its upkeep. What you do with it is, well, obviously you loot. So there are two ways to loot, and there are basically two types of looting, so to speak. Well, actually there are three. Depends on... There are two types of provinces and two types of scenarios in which you can loot. And as for the act of looting itself, we'll talk about it separately. So, you can loot neighbors that are neighboring stuff that you control. Not directly, but stuff that falls under your primary title. So, for example, Luki isn't controlled by me, but is controlled by my vassal. So I can raid from Luki into, for example, Psovk. And let's demonstrate that right away. Right, there we go. Stance on, and here we go. We are now raiding. So, what is it good for? Well, we'll get into that in a second. First of all, let me say that there is another way to raid as well. And bear in mind that the other way is probably a little bit more effective. Because the other way entails me putting my men on ships. Now, make sure they are in raiding stance when you're putting them on the ships. Ships do not have a raiding stance. They're just inanimate objects, right? Don't they have a crew? Not really. No, not really. They're just inanimate objects. So, you put your men on the ships, and suddenly this is a raiding fleet. You can't see it, but this is a raiding fleet. So what you can do with it is you can send it anywhere in the world, drop the men off, and raid. Why is this important? Well, I'm trying to not lose track because there's quite a few things to mention. They're fairly simple and brief, but there's quite a few things to mention. Raiding is essentially looting a province of its gold, and this is not just an imaginatory, an abstract aspect of the game. No, it's a real number. It's right there. When you take a look at the province view, the number of stuff, the number of ducats you can loot is here. So from here to this line is the amount you can loot without actually successfully sieging one of the holdings. If you successfully siege and take over the castle, for example here, you will gain a bit of a bonus because you raided the castle and you went in there and you stole the fine jewelry and the paintings and whatever, and the pretty cups and God knows what else. So you get a bit of a bonus from that. And this line goes a little bit towards the left, so you can raid more. This is essentially, you can't raid past this until you siege something, but to this point you can raid without actually sieging anything successfully. You besiege it, but you don't complete the siege. So, in actual fact, this is how it looks like. We're now collecting money, collecting money, collecting money, collecting money. Collecting money some more, and we're done. We are no longer collecting money. We need to wait for our army to successfully siege this castle. When it does, again, this will move to the left, we'll get some more money out of it. However, the amount of gold you have in a country, or in a county, doesn't really just randomly generate, right? It is dependent on the prosperity, on the number of holdings, on the number of upgrades in those holdings, on whether it is a part of a trade route or not, often on the stewardship of the actual ruler, so on and so forth. So there's many factors that go into that. Wealthness of the actual country and the actual primary title affects it a little bit as well, I think. So the long story short is basically certain provinces are very rich, and these should be your raiding targets, should you have the capability of actually raiding them. A very good raiding target is Rome. However, in the year 867, most targets are a little bit neither here and there. Rome only has 68 ducats. The wealthiest place to raid in the medieval world, both historically and in the game, is Constantinople. Not to say that this cannot change with certain amount of investments into another province or whatever, but the wealthiest province to raid, or the wealthiest county to raid, is Constantinople. It has 170 ducats. A lot of them are raidable just by simply being there. Mousing over, you can see that we can steal 57.9 ducats simply by spending a few days in the region. 92.8 are guarded behind the Theodosian walls of Constantinople, the castle. If you siege down this thing, you get a rather hefty bonus from sieging it, and this thing moves to the left, and pretty much the same rules apply for everywhere in the world. However, as you might expect, the Byzantines don't really take kindly to their capital being raided, so they will send people after you. this is where you don't panic, because first of all, you can escape to the ships if you can and are using ships to raid. You can escape to the ships very easily. Going from the province to the ships is actually very fast. It's a lot faster than going from one province to another. So first of all, you can escape very easily, and there are no real consequences for raiding. So if you take a look at this guy, he will hate me a little bit because it says pillaged my lands. That's because I pillaged his castle directly. If we take a look at the guy over here, he also hates me because I pillaged his lands up until 867, 12, 14. So it's the 14th of December. That's nothing. That's literally a few months that they will hate you for that. So you don't care, right? Because it's so temporary that you don't really care. Now, again, so when I said that there is no real risk and that there's no real long-term penalty for raiding, it's true. The only real penalties that you might stumble across when doing it is losing your raiding army by getting ambushed somewhere or not paying attention, not getting away on time or something like that, right? And that's the only real way it can happen. So, let's go to Constantinople. Losing your army is obviously pretty bad because it reduces the army amount here until it replenishes. You are considered weaker. Your vassals have more influence. If you have any threats, which I don't currently, they will increase a little bit because you have fewer men, so on and so forth. So that's like a political problem that can be caused by losing your men. However, in terms of any wars being caused or lost, or any territory being lost, no. If you attack a neighbor or someone far, far away, they will become hostile towards you because, surprise, surprise, you're raiding them. They tend to defend themselves in those situations. And they could, even in certain situations, cross the border and attack your territory. But they can't take it from you. They cannot occupy it, they cannot win in a war over it unless they specifically declare war against you. And they will not declare war against you because you raided them. No. That is not what they will do. They will declare war if they have a claim, if you're the wrong religion, so on and so forth, but you raiding them will generally not contribute to that. So, let's land 2,400 men in Constantinople and raid it. And there we go. We could stick around and raid some more, or we could leave. For the purposes of this tutorial, we're going to leave. Alright, now, very important distinction to make, and something I see a lot of people getting confused by. And where do I demonstrate it? I need to find someone relatively weak. Georgia, hello. Alright, so, you can raid, if you have ships, you can raid pretty much any coastal region, as long as your ship has access to the port. So, in other words, if you want to raid Sinope, or if you want to raid, I don't know, Cherson over here, you can, but you need to have the ships in the appropriate sea so they have contact. They have, I don't know, like visual range, not really, but they have a direct route to the port of that province. So, if my ships are here and I start raiding Sinope, the port of Sinope is in the Black Sea, not in the coast of Kolkida. So my ships need to be in the Black Sea block here, rather than over here if I'm going to start getting any money from it. Bearing in mind, you can raid without actually collecting the money. Don't do it because it's useless, and you can collect money, so do it. But you can do that. If your goal is purely to weaken the enemy before a war or something like that, which is also viable, and we'll talk about that in a bit. You can do that without collecting money, but there is no reason to, basically. Now, something that used to confuse me a lot, and I believe still confuses some people, is that you cannot raid several provinces deep, right? I mean, you can raid, but you can't collect money. So, let me demonstrate. Gura is a coastal province. Ships are right there. I can raid, okay? Land the troops. Here we go. We're pillaging. There's money flooding in. There's as much as 30 ducats to be had, or 20-something ducats to be had. There we go. We've collected the cash, right? Now I want to raid Cartil. I can't do that. Well, again, I can, but I can't collect money from Cartil. And the reason is, there's nowhere for me to put that money. Essentially, the army can't carry the money in and of itself, and if you mouse over this thing, it'll say, this province can be looted for 1.738 every 4 days. This is split between all looting units, so on and so forth. However, province does not border the realms of the unit's owner, nor are there any friendly ships nearby. Which means all this money is going to waste. Right? All this money is just not going anywhere. It's just fading into the abyss. We're not gaining any of it. So, in order to gain money from the province of Cartil, I would need to border it. There is no other way. Because it doesn't have a port looking out towards a sea or a major river. You can raid from major rivers as well, especially Vikings, because they can actually sail down major rivers. Let's demonstrate this as well. No, we have tech, alright. Give me siege equipment. Oh, we are doing a demonstration on raiding, aren't we? Here we go. So, we shall sail up the river Dnieper and arrive at Minsk. Eventually. Here we go. We can actually raid Minsk. Actually, that's not the block. We're looking for... Hold. We're looking to be here. There we go. So we're now on... try again. We're now right next to Minsk, and we can land there. And we can start looting the Russians rotten. Now, the problem is they don't have a lot of money to begin with, and there's a reason Vikings didn't really like raiding Russia and preferred raiding other people, more west of here, is because Russians didn't tend to stockpile a lot of money. Let's get aggressive leader. Alright, and there you go. So, the few ducats that they're worth, we have now raided from them. Or are raiding from them now. So we can get back on the ships, we don't need to complete that, it's not really worth it. And we can go back. Now, mind you, while you're raiding, you're not actually collecting any of the money on your tab here. It's all being collected on the ships, and if you mouse over, you can see the maximum amount of money they can carry. This is number of ships times 10. Very simple. Very simple. Just like the load capacity for soldiers is number of ships times 100. For cash, it's number of ships times 10. So, 40 ships can carry 400 gold, and the way you get this gold is by docking in a friendly port. Not friendly, in an owned port. So, you need to dock to a port which is controlled by your primary title. It doesn't have to be you directly, it could be your vassals, but... It could be your vassal's vassal, but it needs to be in your country. So, we dock back home with the ships, except that there isn't a dock right there, so we need to dock at Ingria. And boom. There you go. We've now gained 100 gold, roughly, almost, and almost 100 prestige. Influx of loot is also added to the capital. These are several positive modifiers which increase tax by a little bit and levy size by a little bit, so positive buffs, right? Okay. There we go. So remember, you can only loot distant provinces if you have ships next to your army. And you cannot loot several provinces inland. You can only loot coastal provinces, or if you can traverse the major rivers, you can loot provinces that are on those major rivers. Pay attention to where you're putting the ships. They need to be right next to the thing. If you want to raid Minsk, you need to be either there or there. If you want to raid Korsuna, you need to be right there. Okay? Or there, I think. Yeah, there works as well. There you go. So, is it worth it? Yes. Absolutely it is. I mean, there's kind of like a running joke, but the only time you shouldn't be raiding is when you're using your troops for something else. You know, war, rebellions, civil wars, whatever. Any type of armed conflict. pretty much the rest of the time, you need to raid if you can. The game strongly encourages you to do this, especially with, I believe, some of the nomadic cultures somewhere, or one of the Russian cultures. I'm not sure which one. I know a particular culture. I could be one of the ones in. Does anyone in this region have the ability to raid? I don't remember off the top of my head, but I know of one culture that basically can raid overseas with ships and rulers can raid infidel neighbors for loot. This is repeated here, and is repeated here twice. So 1, 2, 3, 4 different times they tell you basically the exact same thing. That's the game's way of telling you you need to raid. It's just bonus money. When raiding, you pay a very small amount of upkeep, and the amount of money you get from it is more than worth paying for your army and then some. So yes, raid constantly, but be careful. If there's one thing I can offer as advice when raiding, is be careful. Try not to lose your army, even though it does happen naturally, but try not to lose it, because it can cause certain political problems. Not just internally, but people from the outside could see, oh, he lost his entire army, let's go attack him. Let's go push our claims immediately, right? So, be careful when raiding. Alright, what else is there? Well, if you put your ruler as the leader of the raiding party, which you pretty much should, you can gain certain traits from being a legendary raider. However, that's not all. Raiding is actually very good for one other thing, and I think the Pope is an example of this. Yes. Okay, so let's quit raiding the Germans over here and go to Rome, which, as we discussed, is not the wealthiest place in the world right now, but it will become substantially wealthier in the future. And we're just going to wait for our ships to get there. Right, here we go. So, we're going to raid Rome. Shockingly, no one around Rome is going to consider, oh, there's Vikings in Rome, maybe we should help the Pope? Yeah, they don't think about that. Not really. Wow. Literally speaking, they do, but they tend to often not bother with helping the Pope. At any rate, why is raiding Saddam awesome, other than money? As you can see, Pope Nicolaus has something in his treasury. Oh yes. He has the bones of St. Peter. What if I told you we could steal them from him? Or we could roll a die, and which then it will determine whether we can steal it from him, or steal them from him or not. Basically, if you raid a particular province and burn, for example, the church in Roma, and a couple of these baronies over here, there is a good chance that you will steal those bones. Now, this is a Christian relic, so I don't think I'll get any bonuses from it, but I could keep it just to spite him, or I could destroy it for a momentary or an immediate boost in, I think, piety or prestige or something like that. So, it really is probably one of, if not the best way to build up a treasury. So yeah, raid, especially with your ruler. Now, yeah, this is why you, also when I said be careful, this is why you should sort of, you know, be careful, because I have just lost a decent bit of my men doing that. So, was it worth it ultimately? Yes, because those men will be retrained soon, and we took all the gold from Rome. Or all the gold that we could take without actually burning anything down. And yes, you can stick around to burn stuff down to the ground. It's actually more or less advisable that you should do that if you have the men to do it. Namely, I can't stick around Constantinople because the Byzantines have upwards of 10,000 men they can mobilize against me. And again, they really don't like it when you burn down their capital. However, if I had 20,000 men as raiders, I could park them on top of Constantinople and leave them there for a fairly lengthy period of time, and they will raid the living hell out of it, and probably plunder the treasury of the Basileus as well while they're at it. Bear this in mind, when raiding you can actually assault holdings as well. Same rules apply towards assaulting holdings when sieging them and when you're actually raiding them. It's pretty much the same thing. If you outnumber the enemy heavily and don't want to wait, go for it. If you don't outnumber the enemy heavily, it's not worth it. You'll just lose a load of men. Never do it. If the enemy has a huge army coming towards you, don't assault it because you'll need those extra men. If the enemy is defenseless, practically speaking, against you, you do assault the holding because it's worth it, because time is kind of money and you do need to save time. Right. Now, raiding, I'll go back to raiding your neighbors again. For raiding your neighbors, you do not need ships. So, again, and I'm running out of men to showcase this off with, but it's fine. Good sword, alright. Okay, there we go. When raiding a neighbor, you don't actually need anything, right? You don't need a ship, you don't need a way of transporting the gold back, it's all automatic. Because you're bordering the province you're raiding, and you can only raid, well, you can raid any province, but you can only raid provinces that you border and collect money from them. The money just goes automatically, instantly across to your capital. Again, this works, your capital doesn't need to border it, it will go to your capital wherever you are. So if I control Crimea and want to raid Cherson, I put my men there, put them in raid mode, cross from there to there, I'm raiding this place, money instantly gets teleported to my capital. Right? You don't need to go back with your army in order to deposit the money or anything. When attacking neighbors like this, the money automatically gets put into your bank. Though, I don't think it is shown in the monthly balance thing, which is actually a good thing because it would paint a bit of a false picture. This is not economy, this is, you know, contrary to what the Vikings might have you believe, this is not a real form of economy. You can't raid and call it economy, this is a special sort of source of income that you get. And there you go, we burnt this thing down. Now, we talked about all the various uses of raiding. There are more, believe it or not. But yes, it's absolutely worth it in terms of money, even though it might not seem like that at first. Just bear in mind you need to pick your targets carefully. There is a reason, though in real life this wasn't really that much of the case. It's a bit over-exaggerated in CK2, but there is a reason why the Vikings went to England and liked it. Money. There's 52 ducats in Wessex. Now, of course, this is no Rome or Constantinople, which I can actually go back to immediately and raid again. But it is worthwhile raiding there as well. Mind you, it's very risky attacking Constantinople as well. Attacking these minor dukes in England, especially because now they're in a war with the Vikings here already, is very worthwhile and relatively safe. So, yeah, go ahead and raid those. That's what money is money. The fact that there is 126 here doesn't mean that you get 126. Matter of fact, you get 57 from this one province. From the one next to it, you get 33. From the one next to it, you get 26. From Nicomedia, you get 49. In Wessex, here you would get nothing because the place is already raided. Here you would get 27, 22, 21. So the Byzantines are more wealthy, and yes, it's more worth it to more worthwhile raiding this. But there is a risk associated with it as well, so bear that in mind and calculate that in when you're deciding and picking out your next target. Plus, it's kind of fun. Gather your army and then, you know, debate with yourself. Who am I going to screw up today? Alright, so there is actually more uses to raiding than that. So if this hasn't convinced you already, the fact that you can build up a massive treasury, which improves your character, and not just your character, but your dynasty in a myriad of ways. For example, I just built a longsword, which will be kept in the family for practically ever. It improves the personal combat skill, it improves the martial, and it improves monthly prestige as well. For any character that has this equipped, and pretty much all characters, unless I find a better weapon, will have this equipped. Forever. Or at least until I find like a level 3 sword, but... or loot it from someone more likely. At any rate, like I said, there is one more use for raiding: weakening the enemy. So this is a little bit of an advanced strategy, but is worth using nonetheless. If you loot a province down, it will have the modifier looted. What does that mean? It doesn't actually mean that much. See, the picture tells one story, the modifier tells another one. So the picture shows the entire thing burning, and all is destroyed, all is lost. In actual fact, it's only a quarter of it. You lose 25% of taxes. Well, not you, the person who owns the looted province, right? Which is why, when you have a load of looters attacking you, and I will talk about that in a second as well, how to defend against them. Short answer is you don't. If they're attacking if they're attacking stuff that you control directly, so if they were attacking this or this, I would raise my army and fight them, or maybe even bring my raiding army back and fight them. If they're attacking my vassal stuff, I would leave it to my vassals to defend themselves, and if they can't, I don't care. Why? It is only 25% less income. He pays me... Well, he doesn't pay me, but let's take a look at this guy. So, if we were to go over here... they pay me 0, because we're a tribe. He pays me 5.3. 25% of 5.3 is, well, like a ducat and a half, 2 ducats, something like that. 1.7 ducats, somewhere in that region. It's miniature, right? 1.25 ducats, I think, something like that. It's so small, it's irrelevant. Especially because this thing doesn't last very long. It lasts roughly 3 years, slightly under, I think. Actually, exactly 3 years. Yeah, it's not that relevant. Plus, you don't have an army that's going to go and raid your entire country, right? They're going to pick out a couple of provinces they're going to raid, and they're going to go away. So, even if you are besieged from all sides by all manners, forms, shapes, and sizes of raiders, it doesn't matter. The penalty they inflict is relatively minor. Now, if you have the Legacy of Rome DLC and you have retinues, if your retinues aren't doing anything, you might as well send them to take care of the raiders, because at that point, it's 1 extra ducat you will have in your treasury at the end of the day. Right? However, even that's not that black and white, because when fighting the raiders, your retinue will lose men. If they lose men, you'll need to pay them to get those men back. So, realistically, whether you're saving money or not is debatable at times. Depends on the size of your retinue, it depends on how many men they lose. But most of the time, it's just not worthwhile. It's not worth your attention. You could be paying attention to other things. You could be focusing on other situations, on other problems that you may have in the game. You raiding, on the other hand, is a lot more beneficial, and there's a reason for that. This money here doesn't go anywhere for the ruler. This could be full, this could be empty, the ruler doesn't care. He does care in the sense of monthly income, because if you loot it all the way to here, the income is reduced, and if you loot the actual holding itself, his income is reduced by 25%, so he does care in that to that extent. But the owner of this province, so for example me, there's 16 ducats here, possible loot is 9. I don't get any of this possible loot. I can't transfer it from here to my treasury, right? So this influences the prosperity a little bit, of this place. You can get it prosperous. If it's looted, you can't really make it prosperous, but that's about it, right? So this number is a hell of a lot more important for those who are raiding rather than for those who are defending. Now, so attacking is raiding, absolutely yes. Defending against raids, only if they're attacking your personal stuff, right? Rest, you can, but it's not important. You can do it or you could not do it, it won't make much of a difference. Defend, I mean. You can defend against them, you can fight them, or you can not fight them, it won't make that much of a difference. Again, unless they're attacking your stuff personally, because at that point it's a thing about it's ego, goddammit. You can't burn my holdings. And it is also kind of important that you keep them away, because income is influenced a lot more drastically if they burn down one of the things that you hold directly, rather than something that one of your vassals hold. So, what about weakening the enemy? I touched on that, but I haven't really elaborated because I got sidetracked a little bit. You can weaken a stronger enemy by raiding, especially if both of you are kind of weak, and he's just slightly stronger than you. What's a good example? Mercia and Wessex are too big for this. You need to look at something like Ireland. So, let's say Connacht could raid one of these two in order to make them weaker. Why? Well, they don't expect it. So if you gather an army here, put them here on top of the place, if they raise their local levies, a lot of those men will have 50% morale, so it's good to fight them like that. So it's useful in that respect. But Juggernaut, they can't raid. They're tribal. Can they raid? I don't think they can raid. Yeah, that's a bit of a problem. Let's take a look at Sweden. Like, these guys can raid these guys in order to weaken them. All right, that makes sense. So you can use it for that, but again, there is a risk. There is a risk that they will beat back your raiding army, and all of a sudden you've taken 1 step forward, 3 steps back. There is a lot safer way of weakening an enemy with raiding, and that's weakening, and this is going to sound a little bit counterintuitive, but you're weakening a weak enemy. How so? Let's say I am about to attack Tver. Right, let's say I take these two from whoever these guys are, and I'm about to attack Tver. Now, I have a claim on Ugli. Uglic? It's usually pronounced ch, right? Uglic? Something like that. Uglik, whatever. Let's say I have a claim on this thing, or a de jure claim, or whatever, or it can't be actually a de jure claim, because Rostov is... Yes, it can. Let's say I have a de jure claim on this thing. I declare the war, I win the war, and I have this thing. All of a sudden, there's a peace treaty in place, and I can't attack Tver again, even though I just got another claim on them, right? What I can do then is I can send a raiding force across the border to Tver, and even though we have a... And I can't do that because there's actually 2,000 men in garrison there, but provided I get a little bit more men, I can raid this thing down to the ground and loot it, thus weakening my enemies a little bit before I actually declare the war. Right, so then, when I declare war on Tver, all of a sudden, their holdings are weak. Now again, if you raid a place, you don't reduce its you don't reduce the amount of men that it has in garrison, except that you do. So the raiding modifier doesn't reduce it, but if you siege down a thing and you don't conquer it, but in terms of the people guarding it, you kind of do. So mechanically, this is how it works. When you siege down a place that you're raiding, you take control of it, and you give it back to the enemy instantly, right? What do I mean by that? Well, all the men that are inside it, the garrison, dies, okay? The entire garrison dies. You don't get control over, you don't get to occupy the holding, but the garrison in it dies. So, you not only gain a little bit of money for the war that you're about to declare in a few years because you have a peace treaty with them, you then go back, you have the extra money, and their holding has no garrison. So all of a sudden you take your army out of raid mode, you declare the war, and their holding has nothing. So actually I'm going to demonstrate that right away. And I shouldn't have talked about it, I should have just shown it, but okay. There we go, we move in. Doctors and ideas, whatever. And we've won, although barely. And there you go. So actually some time has passed already, so the garrison's sort of reinforced itself. But the levies are gone, so the garrison is reduced to that extent. So instead of fighting like several thousand something men in the garrison, we only fight 700. And we win the war. There you go, and now we have a nice and connected empire. So, rinse and repeat until you form the Kingdom of the Roost, basically. In my situation. If you're elsewhere, you can do whatever the hell you want. Right, ladies and gentlemen, that was raiding. Yes, there's nothing else to it. Key pointers to sort of wrap things up. First of all, do it. Hell yes, because it's worth it. Loads of money to be had. Very fun. Traits to be had. Treasury to be had. Enemy gets weakened by it. It's awesome. There you go. That's about it. And yes, it's always worth it, even if you have a bit of a problem with income when you raise the army. It is worth it. The amount of gold you will come back to the province with is always greater than the amount of gold you spent actually raiding, for the actual raid. Again, provided you pick the right target, but it's very simple. You just click on the province and see how much it has. So, stuff that's 40, 50, 60, of course, but everything that's sort of above 35, you go and raid because it's a good target. In terms of here, this number I'm looking at, not the potential to be taken without, not possible loot without sieging anything down. Do not raid stuff that has like 4 or 5 ducats unless you're trying to do what I just did, which is weaken the enemy before declaring the war. And yeah, there you go. Also, another good point to mention, and this is the last one, is if you raid someone like this, like I mentioned for the weakening bit, his allies won't get involved. So his allies won't defend him from you raiding him, but they will defend him if you would declare war. So weakening him also in that respect is also a way to fight him isolated away from his vassals, with admittedly little gain, but you can fight him and weaken him that way. So there you go. That's pretty much everything you need to know about raiding in fairly in depth. So, one thing I haven't mentioned, and will not, is the exact chance of taking something out of someone's treasury. But I don't know the formula for this off the top of my head, but it's a good chance, okay? Like, it's not a 1 in 1,000 chance, it's a pretty damn good chance that you take it. So, yeah, if you see something that you really like in someone's treasury, go and raid his capital, and you'll take it. So, thank you very much for watching. Like, subscribe down below if you enjoyed the video, and until next time, have fun, take care, enjoy CK2, and if you have any questions, of course, post them down in the comments, and I shall respond with all haste. Bye-bye.